The mansion stood tall against the golden hues of the evening sky, its grand walls reflecting the wealth and power of its owner. Inside, silence loomed, an eerie kind, the kind that hinted at something brewing beneath the surface. Tonight was unlike any other. Tonight, the fate of one young boy rested in the hands of a woman who was never meant to be a mother. Jonathan Sinclair, a man known for his immense fortune and sharp business mind, was not the type to leave things to chance. Every decision he made was calculated, every step taken with precision. But tonight, he had no choice. A sudden business emergency demanded his presence overseas, and though he tried every alternative, there was only one person left to watch over his only son, his wife Victoria. Victoria was beautiful, elegant, and charming in public. She knew how to speak in soft tones, how to smile at the right moment, and how to keep up appearances. But behind closed doors, she was anything but a loving stepmother. She tolerated the boy because she had to, because it was part of the life she had married into. She had never been cruel to him, at least not openly. But care, affection, those were things she didn't bother with. Nathan, Jonathan's 8-year-old son, had always been a quiet child. He had his father's sharp eyes and a mind that observed everything. He wasn't fooled by Victoria's polished exterior. He had learned to stay out of her way, to avoid being a burden. His father's love was all he had, and now, for the first time, his father wouldn't be there. Jonathan knelt before his son, placing a firm yet gentle hand on his small shoulder. "I won't be gone long," he promised. "Just one day, Nathan. Be good, all right." Nathan nodded, forcing himself to be brave, even as his stomach twisted with unease. He didn't need to look at Victoria to know she was barely paying attention, already scrolling through her phone, waiting for this tedious responsibility to be over. With one last glance at his son, Jonathan sighed, grabbed his coat, and walked out the door. The heavy sound of it closing echoed through the house, and suddenly, the air felt different, colder. Victoria exhaled dramatically, tossing her phone onto the couch. "Well, kid, looks like it's just you and me." Nathan said nothing. He simply watched as she stretched, adjusting the diamond bracelet on her wrist, before heading toward the grand staircase. "I'll be in my room," she announced. "Don't bother me." And just like that, she was gone. Nathan stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space where his father had just been. The house, though massive, felt smaller than ever. He told himself it was only for one night. He could handle it. He had to. Hours passed. The sky outside darkened, and the once lively house grew eerily quiet. The staff had mostly retired for the night, knowing better than to interfere with Victoria when she didn't want to be disturbed. Nathan stayed in his room, reading a book, trying to ignore the gnawing hunger in his stomach. His father always made sure he ate well. But Victoria, she hadn't even asked if he wanted dinner. The hunger eventually became unbearable. Swallowing his hesitation, he crept out of his room and made his way downstairs to the grand kitchen. The light from the fridge cast a dim glow as he searched for something, anything, he could take without drawing attention. Just as he reached for a piece of fruit, a voice sliced through the silence. "What do you think you're doing?" Nathan flinched, his heart leaping into his throat. Victoria stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her eyes sharp with irritation. "I was just..." He struggled to find words. "I was hungry," she scoffed, walking into the kitchen, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "You couldn't wait until morning." Nathan looked down, gripping the apple in his small hands. "I didn't know if you would..." "Oh, please," she interrupted, rolling her eyes. "You act like I starve you." Nathan didn't respond. He knew better than to argue. Victoria sighed, opening a cabinet and pulling out a bottle of expensive wine. Fine, eat if you want, just don't make a mess. And don't wake me up for anything. I need my beauty sleep. With that, she turned and left. The faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, Nathan ate quietly, feeling more alone than ever. He missed his father's presence, his warmth, the way he always made sure Nathan was safe. He wanted the night to be over, for morning to come, so his father would walk back through that door. But the night had only just begun. As he made his way back to his room, something strange caught his eye. The door to his father's office, which was always locked, was slightly ajar. That was odd. His father never left it open, ever. Curiosity got the best of him. Slowly, he approached the door and pushed it open just enough to peek inside. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of a desk lamp. Papers were scattered across the mahogany surface, along with his father's laptop, still powered on. Nathan hesitated. He wasn't supposed to be in here, but something didn't feel right. Before he could decide what to do, a voice from behind made his blood run cold. "You shouldn't be in there, Victoria." He turned slowly to see her standing in the hallway, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her eyes, something different, something dangerous. Nathan swallowed hard, stepping away from the office door. I was just going back to my room." Victoria tilted her head slightly, studying him. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "That's a good boy," she said softly. "You should get some rest." Nathan nodded quickly and hurried past her, his heart pounding. He didn't look back until he was safely inside his room. The door closed behind him. For the first time in his life, he felt truly afraid, and he had no idea why. But something told him this night wasn't over yet. Nathan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The way Victoria had looked at him, the way she had smiled. It wasn't the usual kind of indifference she showed him. There was something else behind it, something unsettling. He pulled the blanket up to his chin, listening to the silence of the house. It felt different tonight. It felt hollow. He turned onto his side, trying to push the thoughts away. His father would be back in the morning. He just had to make it through one night, but sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house, every distant sound, sent his heart racing. His father's office door had been open. That had never happened before. He had seen the laptop still on, papers scattered. His father was always neat, always careful with his work. Why would he leave things in a mess? Unless someone had been in there. Nathan's stomach twisted. He thought about getting up and checking again, but the memory of Victoria standing in the hallway stopped him. What if she was still awake? What if she was watching? He closed his eyes tightly, forcing himself to breathe slow and steady. But just as he was about to drift off, a sound echoed through the house. A faint noise, like something being moved. His eyes flew open. He held his breath, straining to listen. There it was again. A muffled shuffling sound. It was coming from downstairs. Nathan's fingers curled into the blanket. He knew he should stay in bed. Whatever it wasn't his business. But his curiosity got the best of him. He had to know. Moving carefully, he slipped out of bed, making sure his footsteps were silent as he approached his door. Slowly, he turned the knob and peeked out. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from the large windows at the end, where the moon cast pale shadows on the floor. He stepped out, his heart thudding in his chest. The house felt too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. He moved cautiously toward the staircase, his bare feet making no sound against the plush carpet. As he reached the top of the stairs, he saw it. A light, faint, coming from the direction of his father's office. Someone was in there. Nathan swallowed hard, gripping the railing. He knew he should turn back, but his feet moved forward, taking him step by step down the stairs. His small frame blending into the shadows, he reached the bottom and pressed himself against the wall, inching closer to the office. The door was slightly open, just like before, but now there were sounds. The rustling of papers, the clicking of a keyboard. He took a deep breath and ever so slowly peeked inside. His stepmother stood at the desk, her back turned to him, the glow of the laptop illuminating her face. She was typing furiously, her eyes darting across the screen. On the desk, his father's documents were spread out, some of them stacked neatly. Others flipped over as if she had been searching for something in a hurry. Nathan's stomach clenched. He had never seen her in his father's office before. His father never let her in, never trusted her with his work. But here she was, going through his things in the middle of the night. A feeling of dread settled over him. Victoria suddenly stopped typing, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She exhaled sharply and pulled out her phone, dialing a number. Nathan shrank further into the shadows. "Yes, I'm in," she whispered into the phone, her voice tense. "But I don't have full access. He's locked most of the important files." She paused, listening. "No, I don't know where he keeps the codes. He's smarter than that." Nathan's breath caught in his throat. Who was she talking to? What was she looking for? "I need more time," she continued, her voice sharp. "He'll be back in the morning, and I can't risk him finding out. You don't understand. If he realizes what I'm doing, it's over for both of us." Pause. Then, in a lower voice, she said, "I know what I promised, but things are more complicated now." Nathan felt his pulse pounding in his ears. His stepmother was up to something she didn't want his father to know about. He had always sensed she wasn't trustworthy, but this was something else. Then, suddenly, Victoria turned. Nathan's breath hitched. He barely had time to duck behind the doorway as she glanced toward the entrance of the office. For a moment, there was silence. Then, she spoke into the phone again. "I have to go." Nathan could hear the rustle of papers being shuffled back into place. The laptop lid clicked shut. He held perfectly still, afraid to even breathe. Then the sound of her heels against the floor, coming closer. Nathan's heart raced. If she caught him. But before he could panic, she turned the other way, heading toward the staircase. He stayed, frozen as she disappeared up the steps, her figure swallowed by the darkness of the upper floor. Only when he heard the soft click of her bedroom door closing did he finally let out the breath he'd been holding. His hands were shaking. Victoria was hiding something big, and now he was the only one who knew. He needed to tell his father, but how? Morning was still hours away, and something told him Victoria wasn't done yet. Nathan's hands trembled as he stood in the dark hallway, his heart racing. He had uncovered something dangerous. His stepmother was up to no good, and whatever she was doing in his father's office, she didn't want anyone to know. The weight of that realization sat heavy on his small shoulders. He needed to tell his father. He needed to make it until morning. But then, a chilling thought struck him. What if Victoria knew he had seen her? His stomach twisted as he slowly backed away from the office door, every nerve in his body on high alert. He crept up the stairs, his ears straining for any sound. The house felt like it was holding its breath, just like him. As he reached his room, he carefully shut the door, pressing his back against it. He wanted to lock it, but would that make her suspicious? Would she check on him? No, she never cared before. Still, sleep was out of the question. He climbed into bed, pulling the blanket over him like a shield. Trying to steady his breathing, he kept replaying everything he had overheard. Who had she been talking to? What was she looking for? And most importantly, what was she planning? Next, time passed slowly. Every second felt like an hour. But just when Nathan started to believe he would make it to morning without any trouble, something happened that made his breath hitch. A sound, a soft creak. Right outside his bedroom door, his whole body stiffened. His fingers gripped the blanket as his heart pounded in his chest. He strained his ears, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. Another sound, bare feet moving against the wooden floor. Someone was standing right outside his room. Nathan barely breathed. Then, the doorknob turned. He squeezed his eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. The door opened just a crack. He could feel the cold air from the hallway seep into the room. Then, silence. Long, unbearable silence. And then, the door slowly clicked shut again. Nathan didn't dare move. He waited, counting the seconds in his head. 5, 10, 20. Finally, when he was sure she was gone, he cracked his eyes open. His room was empty, the door closed just as it had been before. But he knew what had just happened. Victoria had come to check on him. She knew. Nathan lay awake for the rest of the night, every fiber of his being tense. He wasn't safe, not until his father returned. He just had to make it a little longer. At the first light of dawn, he heard the familiar rumble of a car pulling up outside. Relief washed over him like a wave. His father was home. Nathan didn't waste a second. He threw off his blanket, rushing out of his room and down the stairs. Just as he reached the bottom, the front door opened, and Jonathan Sinclair stepped inside, looking exhausted but alert. The moment Nathan saw him, he ran straight into his arms. Jonathan, surprised by his son's urgency, knelt down and held him close. "Nathan, what's wrong?" Nathan pulled back just enough to look into his father's eyes, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, I need to tell you something. It's about Victoria." Jonathan's expression changed in an instant. He straightened, his grip on his son tightening just slightly. "What happened?" Nathan glanced up toward the staircase. But Victoria was nowhere in sight. Still, he kept his voice low. "She was in your office. She was on your laptop. She was talking to someone on the phone, saying she was looking for something but couldn't get in." Jonathan's face hardened. He didn't speak for a long moment, but his jaw clenched. He stood slowly, his eyes flickering toward the office door, as if putting the pieces together in his mind. Then, in a quiet but firm voice, he said, "Stay here." Nathan nodded, his heart pounding as he watched his father walk toward the office. A moment later, Victoria appeared at the top of the stairs, dressed in a silk robe, a practiced smile on her face. "Jonathan, you're home early," she said, descending the stairs gracefully. "I was just about to—" But Jonathan wasn't listening. He disappeared into his office, and Victoria's face changed for just a second. A flicker of panic. She turned her gaze to Nathan, and for the first time, he saw something he had never seen before. Fear. Seconds later, Jonathan stepped back into the hallway, his expression unreadable. "Victoria," he said, his voice steady but cold. "Come with me." Victoria hesitated, but she had no choice. She followed him, and the door to the office shut behind them. Nathan didn't know what was said in that room. He didn't hear the argument, the accusations, or the way Victoria tried to explain herself. He didn't see the moment when his father, with a deep sigh of realization, finally saw the truth for himself. But what he did know was that an hour later, Victoria walked out of the house with nothing but a suitcase and a look of quiet defeat. She didn't say a word to Nathan as she left. She simply got into a waiting car, and just like that, she was gone. The house felt lighter. The tension that had settled over it like a storm cloud had finally lifted. Nathan let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Jonathan knelt beside him, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Nathan," he said, his voice filled with both pride and guilt. "I'm so sorry. I should have seen it sooner." Nathan looked up at his father, the fear from the night before finally melting away. "It's okay," he said quietly. For the first time in a long time, he felt safe, and that was all that mattered.